They thought the opening belonged to them. It always does. The confident inhale, the rehearsed posture, the quiet belief that they've already solved you. Funny thing about people who plan too much, they mistake stillness for confusion. You didn't rush. You didn't interrupt. You didn't perform. You watched. You listened. You cataloged the patterns hiding inside their words. Every pause, every subtle push, every moment they expected you to react and you didn't. That silence wasn't weakness, it was calibration. While they were busy talking, you were measuring. While they were stacking assumptions, you were simplifying. And when you finally spoke, it wasn't loud, it wasn't dramatic, it wasn't dressed up to impress anyone. It was short, clean, almost casual, the kind of sentence that doesn't argue, the kind that doesn't ask permission, the kind that lands and just sits there, heavy enough to bend the room. You saw it immediately, the flicker behind their eyes, that microsecond delay where confidence forgets its lines. They had plans for everything except this. They prepared for emotion, for over-explaining, for defensive spirals they could twist into stories. They had scripts ready for panic, for anger, for confusion. What they didn't prepare for was clarity delivered without effort. That's when the temperature shifted. Not with noise, but with that uncomfortable quiet that makes people reach for their phones. Screens lighting up, fingers moving too fast, messages disappearing, narratives being quietly adjusted. You didn't need proof. You didn't need confirmation. You've seen this before. People who rely on control don't confront exposure. They edit. And the beauty of it, you didn't chase the aftermath. You didn't follow up. You didn't stack explanations on top of truth. You let the sentence breathe. Let it echo. Let it do what it was designed to do. Because real power doesn't beg to be understood. It waits. It observes who starts scrambling. It notices who suddenly needs clarity. This is the part most people never reach. They keep talking. They keep justifying. They keep shrinking themselves into shapes that fit someone else's comfort. You didn't. You stayed still, almost amused, not because you felt superior, but because you finally saw the whole structure for what it was. Predictable, fragile, dependent on your participation. And once you stepped out of that frame, the whole thing started wobbling. That's the secret they never teach. You don't break systems by fighting them. You break them by refusing to play along, by speaking once, precisely, and then denying them the oxygen of your reaction. They'll try to pull you back, of course, with confusion disguised as curiosity, with questions that aren't questions, with concern that feels rehearsed. Let them. You already moved. The sentence already landed. Everything happening now is just confirmation, and confirmation is loud only to the insecure. Stay where you are, calm, alert, slightly smiling. This is how legends start, not with noise, not with spectacle, but with a moment so clean, so controlled that everyone in the room feels it, and no one forgets it. They underestimated you before the conversation even started, and that mistake set the tone for everything that followed. People who rely on noise assume silence means lack, that calm equals emptiness, that patience signals delay instead of depth. You saw it immediately, the way they leaned on repetition, the way confidence needed reinforcement, the way every phrase subtly reached outward, searching for control. You didn't interrupt because interruption would have revealed interest, and interest would have fed their sense of leverage. Instead, you let them speak. Let the rhythm expose itself. Let the pattern stretch long enough to become obvious. While they were busy performing certainty, you were tracing structure, noticing timing, watching how their posture shifted when they thought they were gaining ground. They believed they had you measured, labeled, filed away into a familiar category they could manage, because assumption makes people careless, and carelessness breeds predictability. That's when the imbalance formed, quiet but decisive, because every move they made was external, and every move you made stayed internal. There's always a moment when miscalculation surfaces, not loudly but as a pause that lingers too long, a smile that lands half a second late, and you caught it without reacting. Momentum stalled, and when momentum stalls, weakness becomes visible to anyone who's paying attention. They kept talking to fill the space, reinforcing points that didn't need reinforcement, not to convince you but to steady themselves. You stayed still, not passive, not disengaged, but positioned, letting unnecessary movement reveal itself. This is the distinction most people never learn. Restraint isn't absence, it's selection. You didn't need acknowledgement, explanation, or closure. You already saw the structure crack on its own, and once that awareness locks in, there's nothing left to prove. Control is a fragile thing when someone realizes you aren't playing the game they set up. They rely on scripts, rehearsed words, predictable reactions, and the illusion that their careful calculations can map every mind they encounter. They think they understand motives, but motives are only half the truth. Intentions slip, timing falters, assumptions crumble under observation. You watched it all unfold. You didn't just see the surface. You dissected the patterns hiding beneath the bravado, the subtle cues that revealed insecurity wrapped in confidence. Every word they spoke was meant to assert dominance, but dominance loses its power when someone refuses to validate it. They didn't notice the way you cataloged their behavior, silently counting the cracks in their strategy while they believed the battlefield was theirs. Every hesitation, every over-articulation, every attempt at pressure became data for you. You weren't reactive, you were deliberate. You weren't forced into their rhythm, you were the quiet observer in the eye of their storm. That's when the subtle shift begins. They'll smile, misinterpret your calm as naivety, misread your observation as indifference, and miscalculate the cost of underestimating the person who refuses to be predictable. And while they convince themselves of control, they're blind to the unraveling that happens in small increments, invisible to them but glaringly obvious to anyone who watches closely. They will try to anticipate your moves, creating contingency after contingency, expecting the predictable patterns they know how to exploit. But you're not playing their game. You're outside of it entirely. The strategies they rehearsed, the contingencies they planned, the scripts for every imaginable response, all of that becomes meaningless the moment someone refuses to fit into their framework. You compress awareness into a single thread, a single understanding, and it threads through everything they've built, weakening it silently, relentlessly, invisibly. And the moment comes when exposure doesn't need to shout. It doesn't need to call attention. It doesn't even need to acknowledge itself. It exists, undeniable, like a shadow that cannot be ignored, a presence they never accounted for, a calm that reframes the entire battlefield. Their overconfidence begins to betray them. Small cracks appear, hands linger over keyboards, eyes dart to unread notifications, and hurried adjustments mask the creeping realization that control is slipping. They start questioning themselves, double-checking their assumptions, and realizing too late that the terrain isn't theirs to command. That pause you gave them, that single unwavering observation, isn't empty, it's loaded. They feel the weight of it, and their response is always the same: frantic, messy, instinctive. They scramble to reassert authority, but authority requires recognition, and you haven't given them any. You don't have to. The work was done the moment clarity landed. Silent, precise, calibrated to pierce through every layer of ego and expectation. They will try to spin it, to frame it as coincidence, to minimize its impact, but the truth doesn't negotiate. It simply exists. And when truth exists without reaction, without validation, it becomes a force that no preparation can counter. By the time they realize the magnitude, it's too late. Their scripts are irrelevant. Their strategies are exposed as hollow scaffolding built to support assumptions that were never true. And while they panic in the background, adjusting messages, deleting texts, recalibrating every interaction they ever had with you, you remain still, observing, understanding, and almost amused. You've compressed a battlefield of manipulation, expectation, and pretense into one simple fact: they misjudged you, and their understanding of you is already obsolete. That's the moment power shifts without declaration. The moment mastery isn't performative, but intrinsic. The moment they learn too late that someone who sees clearly doesn't fight. They position. They let the collapse happen. They don't need chaos to assert influence. They just let awareness, applied in the perfect measure, do its work. And in that awareness, the echo of every move they ever made in confidence, every plan they thought secure, every script they relied on to dominate, resonates as proof. Control never existed where insight stood. They thought they were leading, you were observing. And the difference between observing and reacting is a quiet, unshakable force that cannot be countered, simulated, or erased. Every correction they attempt only reinforces the truth they're trying to hide, that you were never caught in their game, never deceived by their performance, and never part of their predictable narrative. Every scrambled message, every deleted line, every whispered consultation is evidence of a system collapsing under the weight of being truly seen. And while they panic, while they adjust, while they rewrite their own history in real time, you remain anchored in the one fact that undoes them entirely. Observation, clarity, and precision are stronger than the loudest deception. The battlefield isn't theirs anymore because you never stepped onto it. You remained beyond it, and that's the one thing no amount of planning can ever recover from. Smile. Not because it's funny, because you finally see the pattern. Every move they make, every carefully rehearsed word, every confident assertion, they think it shapes reality. It doesn't. Not here. Not with you. You watch the scripts unfold like puppets dancing on strings you already understand. Their confidence is loud, clumsy, desperate. They assume noise is power. They assume repetition is strength. But clarity doesn't shout. It settles in the room like a shadow that refuses to leave. You notice the flickers in their eyes, the microsecond delays that betray their certainty. Every question they ask, every bait they drop, every smile that tries to mask panic, it's all transparent to you. And that's the delicious part. While they're busy performing dominance, you're cataloging, measuring, absorbing. You don't interrupt. You don't react. You let the tension accumulate until their foundation, carefully constructed over weeks, months, years, starts to fracture under the weight of simple observation. You're not playing their game. You're outside it entirely. And when you finally speak, it's precise, calibrated, surgical. One sentence that lands like a hand on the shoulder in a silent room, enough to bend the air and make them question everything. And when that moment hits, you see it. The flicker of panic, the scramble for control, the urgent taps on keyboards, the sudden deletion of messages. They are trying to reclaim ground they never truly had, to assert influence over someone who was never under their sway. But it's too late. Awareness has already done its work. You don't need to chase it. You don't need to explain it. You let your sentence breathe, echo, and expand, and they realize far too late that the game was never theirs to win. You didn't disrupt with noise. You dismantled with observation. And now all they can do is scramble, recalibrate, and hope the damage isn't permanent. But the truth of being seen, of being understood without resistance, is unstoppable. It lingers, it spreads, it changes everything. And through it all, you remain still, almost smiling. Because the moment of recognition, of unmasking without confrontation, is sweeter than any victory they ever imagined. They were the performers, you were the audience. And for the first time, they realized the show was never theirs. Truth doesn't argue. It doesn't need volume. It doesn't need validation. Your sentence wasn't loud. It didn't scream or plead. It simply existed. Clean, sharp, precise enough to bypass every defense they had rehearsed, every counter they had planned, every trap they had set. You didn't need paragraphs, explanations, or emotional displays to make your point. It landed because you understood the game better than they ever did, because you operated from a level of awareness they couldn't simulate. While they scrambled to regain control, deleting messages, editing narratives, and consulting allies for reassurance, you stood apart, almost amused, almost patient, watching as the structure they built on assumptions slowly buckled under the weight of clarity. Every tactic, every manipulation, every carefully calculated reaction they expected was irrelevant the moment your words existed. They were trained for chaos, for volume, for anger, for over-explanation. They were unprepared for calm, surgical precision. You didn't argue their points. You didn't confront their lies. You didn't validate their perception. You simply compressed all awareness, all understanding, all insight into one sentence that reframed the entire battlefield. And that's why they panicked. That's why their control collapsed. Not because of confrontation, not because of aggression, not because of theatrics, but because you were operating outside the rules they thought governed the game. They had no contingency for someone who saw the whole operation, understood the underlying structure, and chose to respond with surgical brevity rather than emotion. You didn't need to chase reactions, provoke discussion, or engage in dialogue. Silence after the sentence amplified it. Observation amplified it. Their frantic efforts only confirmed its impact. Every deleted text, every whispered consultation, every desperate attempt at reframing became proof that they were exposed, not by accusation or attack, but by the undeniable simplicity of truth applied with clarity. And while they scrambled, you remained still, calm, slightly amused, unshaken. The sentence didn't just counter their strategy, it revealed it, reduced it, rendered it impotent. And in that stillness, in that unbothered observation, you demonstrated a principle they could never prepare for. Mastery isn't about volume, it's about understanding. It's about restraint. It's about the quiet, devastating authority of someone who sees everything, knows everything, and chooses the perfect moment to speak. Your sentence was that moment. And now everything they thought they controlled lies in fragments, while you exist outside their panic, outside their scrambling, untouched by the very chaos they believed would dominate you. You never witnessed the fallout. And that's what makes it exquisite. The real unraveling never happens in front of an audience. It happens behind locked screens and hurried whispers, in late-night calls that weren't scheduled, in fingers hovering over send buttons that suddenly feel dangerous. Somewhere out of sight, confidence collapsed into damage control. Messages vanished. Threads were edited. Stories were softened, rearranged, reworded to sound harmless in hindsight. Not because you attacked, not because you accused, but because you didn't need to. You introduced a problem they couldn't solve, awareness without emotion. That's the part they can't tolerate. They can fight anger, they can spin confusion, they can even exploit vulnerability. But calm perception leaves them exposed with no angle to grip. So they scramble in private, replaying the moment again and again, trying to locate the exact second thing slipped beyond their control. Was it your tone? The timing? The stillness after? They don't know, and not knowing eats at them. Their private conversations turn circular, each person reassuring the other, while secretly wondering if you noticed more than you revealed. They ask themselves questions they never planned for. How long did you see this? What else do you know? Who else noticed? Control relies on certainty, and certainty evaporates when someone refuses to confirm your assumptions. Every attempt they make to regain footing only deepens the unease, because the more they adjust, the more obvious it becomes that something went wrong. They're not fixing a mistake, they're hiding a realization. And the realization is simple, terrifying in its simplicity. They misjudged you completely. You weren't confused, you weren't behind, you weren't reacting, you were watching. That truth settles slowly, like a weight they can't shake, because it reframes every interaction they've ever had with you. Every moment they thought they were guiding the outcome now feels questionable. Every word they assumed landed now feels uncertain. Meanwhile, you're not celebrating. You're not pressing advantage. You're not even following up. That's what unsettles them most. No pursuit. No escalation. Just distance and silence that feels deliberate. They can't tell if you've moved on, or if you're simply letting the consequences unfold on their own. And that uncertainty keeps them restless. They refresh conversations. They reread old messages. They try to predict your next move, because prediction is the only way they feel safe. But there is no next move. There doesn't need to be. The shift already happened. The work was done in one moment of clarity they can't undo. While they stay busy rearranging fragments, you remain still, grounded, observant, letting the truth they triggered handle the rest. You don't need to watch them struggle to know it's happening. The absence of noise tells you everything.